Hey, Masters of the Universe and toy fans, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich here. A kind of follow-up to a video I posted recently about kind of the brief history of the MOTU brand not quite working at retail. Well, this is kind of a counterpoint to that video, and it's specifically about a group of very talented sculptors and how they actually saved Masters of the Universe and He-Man, or whatever you want to call the brand. Some people call it He-Man. Technically, it's Masters of the Universe. Some people call it He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. But that's not important right now. I was the brand manager for about 10 years of the brand, under the Four Horsemen's time doing the Classics line, not when they were doing the 2000X line. So I'll say right now at the top of this video, I may have some of my historic facts wrong about the 2000X era, but I'm going to try my best from what I know. So the Four Horsemen. Who are they? Why are they? Where are they? Well, they're in New Jersey. They're amazing. They're very, very talented sculptors and toy sculptors. They're a team, and they do a lot of their own stuff, especially recently, like this awesome eagle toy and this awesome Ganesh toy or elephant toy. In their Mythic Warriors line, they've done licensed toys. All sorts. They're basically phenomenally talented, and their kind of key differentiation is the detail, the work that they do in sculpting an enormous amount of detail into their figures. And I think they're recognized as some of the top sculptors in the industry. All right, quick roll call. So left to right, we have H. Eric Mays, followed by Eric Treadaway, Chris Dahlberg, and then on the far right is Jim Preziosi, the original founding members of Four Horsemen Design Studios. And of course, if you're wondering where Corn Boy is and where you see him, is because for those of you who know your history, Corn is also called Mays. Get it? Mays. His last name is Mays, but it's spelled slightly differently, and Corn Boy. Okay, you get it. The point is, these guys have been together for about 20 years. Chris Dahlberg did leave the group, I think about 5-7 years ago, to form his own, I think he was called the Lone Horseman for a while. I think he may have changed the name of his firm, his development firm. But either way, the original three are still together. In fact, they've actually also gotten help from other designers, specifically Jordy here, who I also had the privilege of knowing. He sculpted some of the MOTU Classics figures with them, like Jitsu and Eldor. So they did bring in other talent as time went by and grew the Four Horsemen beyond just the original four. Now, most fans know them originally from their work at McFarlane Toys, where they got their start. They were the ones who really brought this high level of detail I sometimes called hyper anime detail. Sometimes I would describe it that way. They did a whole smattering. Smattering, is that a technical word? Smattering of toys for McFarlane, including one of my favorites is this Egyptian mummy set when they did the monsters. Those monster sets were awesome. In fact, Eric Treadaway used that set to get himself his head sculpt in there as Dr. Frankenstein himself there. So I believe that's supposed to be Eric. In fact, he's not the only one who did that. Corn Boy, H. Eric Mays, aka Corn Boy, they actually did a figure at McFarlane in their Total Chaos line. The figure was called Corn Boy. And don't look too closely at that head sculpt, because that's definitely supposed to be Eric, or Corn Boy, if you will, sculpted as the character, which is really cool. This was Total Chaos was kind of a line of original creations from McFarlane Toys that was like outside of just doing Spawn. So their work with Mattel started off on the Harry Potter line. I know a lot of people know them from their work on DC and their work on Masters of the Universe, but I could be incorrect on this. They may have done something before this, but I know their early work at Mattel was working as work for hire, doing some of the sculpting on the Harry Potter toys from the first movie, which Mattel did action figures of. I believe they did some of the beasts there, including like this Balsamic snake figure. I could be wrong. I wasn't at Mattel at the time, and I'm piecing this together from some dinners I had with the Horsemen over the years. Either way, doing the Harry Potter figures kind of gave them their foot in the door with Mattel, and they proposed the idea of doing more He-Man toys. So, in the discussions with Mattel on bringing back He-Man, because they were big fans of the Masters of the Universe brand, they actually did a couple different versions. This one here is more of kind of a medieval armor version of He-Man, but they still kept those furry shorts. In this case, they used soft goods on the maquette on the statue. That's not an articulated figure you're looking at. It's a statue for proof of concept. They also did one that was more of kind of like an Asian Zen kind of version of He-Man. Again, keeping the key elements like the logo or his emblem, the Iron Cross logo. It's not an Iron Cross, but in modern times it can be interpreted as that. It's a He-Man cross, whatever you're going to call it. A He-Man plus sign. Let's call it that. Let's call it the He-Man plus sign. That's a good way to refer to it. All right, I'll note that for future videos. Either way, they did a few different versions, and Mattel was also working at relaunching the line in animation, and they did a lot of testing. So these images here, which are from the 2009 art book, show 4 of the different styles that were tested with kids. More of a traditional style, a hyper detail style, a thinner style, different ways that He-Man and Skeletor could be interpreted artistically to see which one would have the most appeal with kids. And the version that won out is basically the version that became the 2000X line that the Horsemen worked on. So with this creative direction, now that they knew sort of which version to focus on, things like that medieval knight or that Asian monk version were out, and they were back to the original barbarian version and started doing, if you will, some prelim sketch work on how they could reinterpret Masters of the Universe through this look. And they came up with a lot of really unique ideas, like the electronic sword that would replace He-Man's sword because it had been stolen by Skeletor. And a lot of it culminated in a statue that the 4 of them brought to San Diego Comic-Con to show off what the new look was going to be. I remember they were just at a fold-out table. I don't know if it was at the Mattel booth or their own booth. I want to say it was at the Mattel booth. And this is way before I joined Mattel. So again, my apologies to them personally if I'm screwing up some of the continuity and some of the details. A lot of this is from memory and piecing together from conversations we had at different dinners over the years. But the point is they brought a statue, not this one, the one that we just saw. This was another interpretation of He-Man that they did. They did a lot of early work. They really did explore many different kind of looks and styles and because they wanted not only to appeal to collectors like themselves, adults, but to kids too, because they knew getting kids into the brand was the key. Getting adult collectors into the brand, here you can see Cornboy talking to one of them, not me, that's just a collector. Adult collectors like shooting fish in a barrel. You're going to get Masters of the Universe figures if you're into the brand. But kids, I've said this before, that's the key to longevity. So they had to find a style that was going to resurrect the brand and bring it to modern audiences, modern kids, and would also appeal to collectors too. The idea, we weren't supposed to leave collectors on the floor, but they were always sort of gravy on top. And the idea was, some of the adults were now old enough that maybe they were even starting to have their own kids. I think that's more so with Origins now, less so with 2000X, where a lot of the fans were in college age. But hey, maybe some of them had kids. Anyway, the point being is it was because of their amazing work that working with Mattel and then Mike Young Productions that the 2000X series really came about. And they wound up designing a lot of the characters for the show. Basically, everything was happening at the same time, and their designs, were sort of heavily influencing the character designers on the Mike Young show. Like, for example, Teela here, you can see the Four Horsemen version next to the animated version, and how that would translate into a more simplistic design while still incorporating that unique look they'd created. In fact, I can remember Cornboy or Eric had said to me once that the only comment they got from Mattel on the original Teela design was to make her boobs bigger. They thought that she wasn't feminine enough, which, hey, that makes her sexier and cooler. So, but other than that, they really didn't get much feedback on the designs. They were kind of knocking it out of the park. Here you can see the Skeletor design. That sword he's holding is meant to be the vintage power sword that Skeletor has stolen both sides and combined them, which is why He-Man has to have the electronic sword. That didn't wind up getting used in the animation series, but it did make it into the toy line, and we also incorporated that concept into classics. But that's a story for another time. Either way, it wasn't just about redesigning the main character He-Man. They needed to redesign the entire Masters of the Universe world in this new look. And I know they'd mentioned to me, again, over many dinners we had together, about how they really tried to capture that vintage look. They weren't trying to reinvent the characters. They were just trying to update them. They were trying to bring, more detail, cooler armor, but in each character design, the idea was to have the essence of who that character was, so you could immediately recognize it. So, He-Man and Skeletor, while they're a little different from the vintage figures, you immediately, anyone would say, oh yeah, that's He-Man, that's Skeletor, bam. And that was really the idea. And that was how they saved He-Man, how they brought him back through their amazing, reinterpretation and their ideas for taking this new aesthetic and applying it to the entire world of Masters of the Universe. Before they came and did this, He-Man was essentially a dead line for Mattel. It had, failed at retail twice in '87 and then again the New Adventures line a few years later. So it was really looked at as a line that wasn't something to pursue. Now, they didn't just save He-Man once. They came along and saved him a second time. So after the 2000X series went off the air and the toy line ended, both of which collectors, I think was very, premature. But because of their love for the property, they were able to convince Mattel to sublicense out Masters of the Universe in that 2000X style to NECA to continue the 2000X line, at least the toys, as non-articulated statues, or what they called staction figures. I love that concept. I think it's great. Kevin Smith did it with the Clerks figures, too, which are hilarious. Knowing that most fans were just going to put them on their shelf, articulation wasn't necessarily necessary. You could just make a really badass figure and sculpt it in that style, and it would kind of work as a representation of that character on an action figure shelf. This figure, Hordak, in particular, one of the early stactions that I definitely acquired, and I actually brought this staction figure into Tim Kilpin during my pitch meeting for what became Matty Collector and Masters of the Universe Classics, essentially saying, look, there is an adult collector audience out there for this stuff. We should be doing this. And, he looked at this Hordak and was like, wow, we didn't do this? We had another toy company do this? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Let's do this ourselves. So this was a collector-only line, these stactions. It was not aimed at kids. It was only sold in, like record stores like Tower Records and Sam Goody and online. You did not see these at Target and Walmart because it was collector-only. But it was a great collector-only line. And, it was really what I think the existence of this line helped inspire Mattel to do Matty Collector, recognizing that the adult collectors were strong enough to support a line. Not strong enough to support it at retail, but if we could find a way to sell these outside of retail, meaning what became Matty Collector, then there was a big enough audience. The fact that the audience was buying these stactions was proof. So here the Four Horsemen are saving He-Man and the Master of the Universe yet again. They brought it back after it died in 2000X, and by providing these staction figures through NECA, they provided the fuel and the evidence for Mattel to do an adult collector line. So let's talk about that, about the third time that they saved Masters of the Universe. So years go by. I'm now at Mattel working on a King Grayskull or 2000X figure based on Ice Armor He-Man. And along they come to Comic-Con with this brand new scale and concept for He-Man. Once again, totally on their own. Totally, if you will, oblivious or unknown that independently, I at Mattel was working on this King Grayskull figure. Once we saw this sculpt, we were like, nope, let's do that. Forget the 2000X King Grayskull. They also designed, or at least pitched what they hoped the packaging would look like. I want to say the artwork is from Emiliano Sankara. Oh, God, I'm mispronouncing his last name. I'm butchering it. I'm sorry, Emiliano. I believe he did the artwork there of Merman, and so this was part of the pitch that the Horsemen did along with the sculpt, was this card back. Senchkalia, right? Oh, am I getting it right there? All right, I'm going to have to look it up after this. Again, sorry, Emiliano, for butchering your name. So even though, the Horsemen had pitched this idea of having this original artwork on the cards, it was not something we could afford. And this was basically replaced with the scroll and the bio, specifically because we couldn't afford to do art and we needed to fill up the back of the package. So, and Merman also, became a figure that was kind of part of the pitch because specifically Eric Treadaway always wanted this version of Merman, the one that was from the vintage card back with the head with those fins, not the repainted, not Stinkor head, but the head that became Stinkor's head. So the Horsemen did it again. It's like now they've sculpted all of Masters of the Universe for a second time. And I remember both Cornboy and Eric had said to me once that they were amazed they had the opportunity to not only sculpt Master of the Universe once in the 2000X line, but the fact that they got to do it a second time in Classics was beyond a dream come true for them. I mean, and in Classics, they really did sculpt the entire universe. And one of the things I want to hit on in this video is not just the fact that they saved Masters of the Universe multiple times, but those extra details that they brought. Things that we never even asked for, like, Carnivis's shield here with that really cool lion symbol against the purple field with the gold highlights around the edge. We just said, give Carnivis 2 accessories, never specifically what to do. And the shield was an homage to the middle tower from the Eternia playset, which had a lion. Made sense. There's a lion motif in MOTU. Let's use it on the lion character. Totally unasked for. They just did that. And that's what makes them so amazing. Another example is Adora's gun. The pistol that Adora came with that fit in her holster. Again, we just asked them to add an additional accessory for Adora because the idea was every figure needed to come with at least 2 accessories so that we could cut one in a potential retail year, even though that never happened. So that gun is actually this gun. It's actually based on a real prop gun. And you might be looking at that as like, wait a minute, I don't recognize that. That's, not Luke Skywalker's blaster. No, it's Teela's blaster. It's Teela's gun from the 1987 movie. So, again, just a little Easter egg that they put into the line that's what they do. A third example, and I'm not going to, go through and do a million of these, but this one's kind of funny because it makes fun of me. The Man-at-Arms figure that they did, so if you look at the vintage art on the cross-sell, he had those furry shoulder pads, if you will, or like fur going around the sides of the armor. That was not represented on the vintage toy. The vintage toy, the armor just stopped with the orange tech. It didn't actually have the fur. So when it came time to doing the Classics figure, they added in the fur, like it was on the cross-sell. And I remember when I saw this, my first reaction was like, no, we're supposed to stay away from 2000X, because 2000X had the fur. The idea is to do a different look. And they were the ones who pointed out, like, no, the original vintage toy on the cross-sell had the fur. And I was like, oh my god, you're right, wow. Okay, I forever praise you guys as the masters of the Universe. You know way more about this brand than I do. And one of the ways I'm really glad we were able to thank them for all their hard work is by giving them one of the slots in the 30th anniversary line, which was Drago-Man. They wanted to call him Dragon Man, but unfortunately that name was not available. Probably because of the Fantastic Four villain. So their second choice was Drago-Man, and it's funny, I said, design any character you want, and of course they designed a character with giant wings and a giant tail and tons of accessories, and, like sort of way more than we had a budget for. In fact, we actually had to cut out some of the accessories. This is the original prototype that they showed at Comic-Con with flaming sword and flaming shield, and, again, huge bat wings or dragon wings, huge tail. And there was no way we were going to be able to afford all of this. But knowing the Horsemen and how much respect I had for them, I really wanted to find a way to get all of the accessories that they intended for the line out. Like this fiery shield that they wanted to do that didn't ship with the original figure. And in fact, I think they wanted to have like one shield that was off and one that was on. Like two, one on fire and one not. And, unlike even my own creation, the great and mighty Spectre, who had a laser whip that was supposed to plug into the arm socket where the laser knife is, and that whip got cut, and we never quite found a way to get it out. I did feel like with the Horsemen, on the other hand, I wanted to do everything I could to find a way to get the flame whip and the flame shield out, and we did that in a weapons pack when we were able to actually tool up new weapons towards the end of the packs. The first packs were just repaints, but eventually we got a little bit of tooling for these packs. And the first thing I did was say, oh, we're tooling up the rest of Drago-Man's accessories, because, come on, we owe it to the Horsemen. Look what they did. They sculpted the entire Classics line, and they put so much love, always going above and beyond. I think that Masters of the Universe Classics and 2000X could have never succeeded without the extra above and beyond love that the Horsemen gave it, because they are true fans. So, when you see giant statues of He-Man, at Comic-Con or, etc., it's because of them. They were the ones who really brought He-Man back by, pitching to Mattel to bring it back multiple times and always coming up with a very creative, artistic way of doing that to resell the line to kids, collectors, and beyond. And we really have them to thank. If I missed anything in this video, please let me know. I'm sure I got some of my early history with McFarlane or the Harry Potter stuff wrong, because I wasn't around at that time. But let me know in the comments below, and hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel, give me a like, ring a bell, and I'll see you guys around the toy aisles.